I think the most important thing that we need to understand about the actual stroke itself is that there's many phases and ways of looking at a stroke. In over 25 years of coaching at the highest level, but also from a grassroots right the way through, I think I've found that this is probably the best way to develop and analyze stroke production. So what we're going to do today is look at the phases of the swing that we look at when we are analyzing, and then also we're going to break it into some of the grips and how that affects what happens down the track. So importantly enough, that when we look at the phases of the swing, we're going to break it down into 5 different phases here. So we look at the preparation phase, into the backswing phase, forward swing phase, contact, and then tie it into follow through. So we have a look at it from a segmented phase production. Why, from your eyes, is it important to break it down from a phasical situation as opposed to anything else?
So the biggest thing I want to say is many different ways you can break down stroke production. This is where that I found with my consulting work in the professional tennis is that this is the best way to help translate information. Now, in each of these phases, there are a lot of other smaller things that are going on, which we'll detail in a second. But being able to break down these major components, we normally see these static images as a common thing when breaking down biomechanics and for all the shots in that sense. But these are the common foundational checkpoints that we would be trying to, as a biomechanist, as a consultant, I would be going to these athletes and saying, okay, at these positions, here's what you're achieving, but then it's what happens in between these phases and during these phases that is the important part that's a result to each phase. So as Mark was saying, it's a segmented approach or a 5-phase approach to breaking down technique, but we need to understand that each of these phases are sequentially on to each other, so they're each impacting each other as it goes on.
And I think the important thing when we look at phasical approach is that what generally occurs here and what we see at contact, so we see a lot of errors come in at contact. You'll see it happen here, but actually the cause of the problem probably starts and is generated from the start. So we're going to look at how we analyze stroke production from a phasical standpoint and see if we can break down the swing in the different phases. Okay, so we're into the preparation phase. When it comes to analyzing and correcting, which is the coach's main job, it's really important to understand where to start. If we do not get this part right, we are in massive trouble from a coaching standpoint. We are looking too far ahead because it's really important to start at the beginning of the swing. And Nick, you put together a couple of your most important points here from a biomechanical lens, and we go back to our biomech acronym. What do you think are the 2 most important points?
So most important points for the preparation phase is your balance and your elastic energy. Now, one thing I will say is that all these different components are acting in unison, but there's certain features that can be more prominent for you guys as coaches to make it practical and help develop your players as best as possible during the preparation phase. So the balance, we always want to make sure we're maintaining a lower body balance, so we're moving when we're static, so we're low, wide, and strong, or when we're dynamically, that we're maintaining our posture and moving so that we're balanced in our upper body. It also comes into play with the balance of our shoulder planes and our hip planes. We don't want to be jiggling everywhere. We want to make sure we are stable enough so that we can control the movements as we need to do as we prepare. And that controlling of movements is then getting the elastic energy development, so getting the muscles, getting the load or the coiling of the positions that we need to be in to help us to then obviously go flowing into the following phases, which we'll go into greater detail.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, we talked about perception and movement. Without the ability to have a low base as we've got here, and then be able to then track and see the ball, it's very hard to get into the right position. So it's that starting point that obviously gets us to the right point. And if we do not get the start right, we can't expect to get the end right. So whenever we do some analytical work around swings, and the reason we've gone into phases is that it gives us a stepping stone to analyze and correct. So if the impact point is not right, something has happened before that causes that. It's the cause and effect issue that we probably don't address enough as coaches. And then, these are the 3 key elements of that. So when we look at our players, we want to see, and we've got a great photo here to show that and showcase it, but balanced position with a wide base of support. So knees need to be about 110 degrees, which is really important, with a nice wide base. And the next part is the split step. So when we talk about perception and movement, it starts with a split step. So reading the impact and cue of the ball gives us the right timing to split step to enable our first movement to be really fast. So teaching players all starts from the preparation phase. And what I'm going to show you next is ways in which we can probably teach our players how to balance really well in the preparation phase.